here that I could shout, but I can't shout loud enough for the streaming. So, and we need this for the streaming. Okay. Here come other people. Hi, Natan. Shabbat shalom. Chag Shavuot Sameach. Well, good shantif, as they said in the olden country, in our olden country. Thank you. You know, I just wished it and it happened. Well, you know, this is kind of symbolic of this holiday, right? Like you find out it's Shavuos, it's like, I'm not going to that one. But you come every Friday night, but it's Shavuos, right? Rabbi Jera said she loves Shavuos. Rabbi Jera, nobody loves Shavuos. No, that's not true. That's not true. I'm going to give you 101 reasons to love Shavuos tonight. So let me give you, as long as we are this intimate group, let me tell you what's coming up. So first of all, Lonnie, please do not touch this. This microphone, when you come to read, don't touch it. Just leave it here. Leave it here. Why are you saying that? Because sometimes you forget it. And it's really important because the people at home need to hear it. And that's the only reason we're using it. I actually like my little box here. All right, so on a serious note, everybody, welcome back after our Memorial Day break. A couple of program notes and a couple of things I want to say. Next week is when I'll be talking about Harvard University and Columbia and all that mishigas that's going on. I know I've been threatening to, but every week there's a new development. So I just decided Shavuot was not the time to do that. I wanted to talk about Shavuot on Shavuot. And then that will be our last service for 2 weeks. We'll be off from services, but we do have a special movie planned. Sarah Markowitz and I came up with a great title. It's called To Be or Not to Be. It was made by Jack Benny and Carol Lombard. And unfortunately, you know, she died before it was released.
So you'll have the movie, but not...
Well, consult the calendar. Everything is on the newsletter, which is online, and the calendar is up to date. Guess why I know that? Because I updated it. So it's absolutely up to date, except for the parts that aren't, and I take no blame for that. Because that'll be the day that, oh, but you forgot that one, and then of course I would. But before we start, I want to make a couple comments about what's going on, because I didn't want it to be part of our service tonight. A week and a half ago now, we witnessed a murder, an execution. If you're like me, you didn't want to read a lot about what happened, but you should know that the young woman pleaded with her life and he chased her down and shot her execution style. And I'm referring, of course, to the 2 young Jewish people who were killed at the Jewish Museum in Washington. I listened to the father speak, and it could have been me talking about my own daughter, who, by the way, lives near there and goes to that museum for events. That event, by the way, was to provide humanitarian aid to both sides, including Gaza. Sarah Milgram was 26 years old. Yaron Lashinsky was 30 years old. These are children, our children. And as he did it, afterwards, as he waited, he shouted, "Free, free Palestine." Did that free it? And globalized the Intifada, which, as you all may recall, represents 2 of the most horrific periods in Israeli history, in which thousands of Jews were targeted at holidays, on buses, living their everyday life. I was there twice during the second Intifada, 3 times actually. Saw a pizza place go up, saw a coffee shop that I had had coffee in disappear the night after I had coffee in it. And that's what they want to globalize. And then I witnessed the social media and the Democratic Socialists of America, who appropriately expressed their dismay and then fought about it online. And a breakaway group decided this was not something to be dismayed about. This was something to celebrate. And they called for more violence. They, by the way, including the man I'll be speaking about, one of them, Mahmoud Khalil, who heads an organization or is involved in an organization called the Unity of Fields, which is part of the DSA. And they said that they asked whoever said that change in this country has to be nonviolent. And we're their favorite targets now. I don't mean to bring us down, because I'm going to bring us up now. Because one of the things Jews are, if nothing else, is resilient. We have celebrated through much worse than these people can offer us. Through pogroms we have celebrated. Through expulsions we have celebrated. We have always found a way to experience our resilience, to demonstrate it. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to celebrate this oft forgotten, sometimes put to the side holiday that Miriam dearly loves. And the reason we're going to celebrate it with extra oomph, even if we might not have the crowd we normally do, we're going to be 14 times, 18 times, that's the number, more celebratory than we've ever been before, certainly as Humanistic Jews. Although Sherwin wrote some really nice services and I cribbed from it. All right, our readers tonight are Rabbi Miriam Jairus, who'll be joining me in a moment, Ruth Kadish, Audrey Pleasant, Audrey's here, and Lonnie Fleischer. And we're going to begin with our reading before the candles. Slide number 1, if you will, Arthur. As our candles stand before us, waiting to be set alight, we take a moment to recall our ancestors. This is now dead. Our ancestors. Like them on Shabbat, we seek to dispel the darkness and banish the cold, to bring glowing softness, warmth, and safety into our homes, our communities, and our lives. May our Shabbat lights inspire us to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to praise and not to curse. May the flickering flames of our candles spark warmth within our hearts, wisdom within our minds, and passion in our lives. I'd like to invite Jean Klarich to light our Shabbat candles as we recite our blessing. If ever there was a Jewish holiday with an identity crisis, Shavuot is it. For ancient Israelites, it marked the first fruits of the winter crop. Later generations made it the anniversary of receiving Torah at Mount Sinai. Reformed Jews, and then others took it upon themselves, designated it as confirmation, a ceremony of their own invention. For all of them and for us, it is one thing that we all have in common, a time to celebrate the fullness of spring and the advent of summer, hopefully very soon.
Shoshano Shva Alcha Shlach Shir Balat Zemer Shel Ahava Laila Yored Leat Veruach Shoshano Shva Alcha Shlach Shir Balat Zemer Shel Ahava.
There are 3 times of year designated by the Torah as pilgrimage festivals: Sukkot in the autumn, Pesach at the dawn of spring, and Shavuot, when summer first calls. In ancient times, Jews were encouraged to undertake a pilgrimage to Jerusalem for these festive days. All 3 of these holidays originated as agricultural feasts. Over the course of time, they were transformed to include celebrations of significant events in the Jewish history. By the time of the final editing of the Torah, both Sukkot and Pesach had already added these new stories. Sukkot became a commemoration of Israelites wandering the wilderness in temporary huts. Pesach completely absorbed the grand saga of the Exodus. But it was not until long after the Torah's final edition was well known that the rabbis linked Shavuot to its central mythic event, the revelation of the Torah to the Israelites at Mount Sinai. The evolution of these holidays is an important reminder of how Jewish traditions have always changed to meet new needs.
Shavuot is the most modest of the pilgrimage festivals. Its name means weeks, as the holiday falls exactly 7 weeks after Pesach. There are only a few rituals that grace the holiday. One of these is the custom of eating dairy foods, perhaps to symbolize the idea that Torah is the milk that sustained the Jews. In most synagogues, worshipers read the Torah's tale of revelation at Mount Sinai, including the 10 Commandments. They also recite the book of Ruth, about ancient Israel's fabled convert, said to be the great-grandmother of King David.
Life is a joyful thing, ever and ever.
On Shavuot, traditional Jews rise in synagogue as the Torah reader chants the most famed of all ancient laws, the Ten Commandments. Tonight, let us, in our own way, recall that tradition with 10 ideas to improve the world. Open your heart to all the possibilities of life. Value people over possessions and meaning over materialism. Speak the truth with honesty and respect. Take time for joy and wonder. Forgive yourself, and when possible, forgive others. Protect and nurture life. Be faithful to those you love.
Be generous of spirit.
Try to walk in your neighbor's shoes.
Cultivate gratitude. Tikvati bi, eifo kochi, kochi bi, vegam bak, eifo kochi, kochi bi, vegam bak. Where is my light? My light is in me. Where is my hope? My hope is in me. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you. Where is my strength? My strength is in me and in you, and in you.
Shavuot peace. Now summer's prospect, the world ripening and growing softer, the promise of harvest fulfilled, the warming sun lies before us. Now the vision of hope, the world at peace and growing gentler, the promise of goodness fulfilled, the loving heart lies open to the mind.
That's a hard one to read.
Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, re'al kol ha'olam ve'meru shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam ve'meru shalom, shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam ve'meru shalom. Nase shalom ba'olam, nase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol ha'olam ve'meru shalom, shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support. Those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these beloved members of our community, to Lee Bricker, to Saul Foreman, and Jim Walker, together with anyone whose name you'd like to mention. We'll go around here, yes. Anybody else on this side? In the back? Yes, Howard. Yes, go ahead. Anyone else that we missed? May all who suffer know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly, and may they experience a complete recovery, a refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Today is the 602nd day of captivity and the 87th Shabbat for the hostages who remain in Gaza. May those who continue to endure captivity find the courage to carry on. May those who love them not despair of their return. May they soon emerge from their confinement, whole in body and in spirit, to know once again the embrace of loved ones.
Makom HaKoach betochenu, Mekorot HaBracha midabrotenu. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Shalom. Ekom HaKoach betochenu, Mekorot HaBracha midabrotenu. May those in need of healing know refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Shalom.
Thank you, Jeff. The light of life is a finite flame. Like the Sabbath candles, life burns. It glows, it is radiant with warmth and beauty. But soon it fades. Its substance is consumed, and it is no more. In light we see. In light we are seen. The flames dance, and our lives are full. But as night follows day, the candles of our life burn down and gutters. There is an end to the flames. We see no more and are no more seen. Yet we do not despair. With our lives, we give life and love. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and death, of light and life. Thank you.
Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, as we mentioned earlier, the Jewish community of the United States and the world continues to mourn the deaths of Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky. And tonight in our congregation, we take this time to observe the yahrzeits of these beloved members of our community and their friends and loved ones, of Shirley Berman, Eli Bricker, Sidney Broida, Harold Denenberg, Ann Ellenbogen, Morton Fryer, Joyce Lopas, Ben Magder, Irving Reiter, Clara Roman, Carl Stillwater, Frida B. Williams, Bertha Zucker, Clarence Zucker, and Jacob Zucker. And if there's someone whom you're thinking about tonight who you'd like to remember, please feel free to share their names. Anybody here? No? On this side? We say Yehi Zichram Livracha. May the memories that we carry around in our hearts of these beloved people, those who died young and those who died in the fullness of time, provide us with a reason to be grateful and a source of some comfort. Please rise as together, if you're comfortable doing so, as together we recite our humanistic interpretation of Kaddish. Nitgadal v'nitgadach beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each in our own way take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. Well, we seem to be having some outages here with the projector too, but that at least you'll just keep in a picture in your mind. Hopefully one day we'll get the tech. I know they're working on it. I don't want anybody to think that they're not working on it. They're absolutely working on it. And it's not so easy. This is an old building. And we all know it's had its problems, like we all do when we get older, right? I'm in that age now, so I can relate. I did not arrive at that age, but I am now there. And sometimes it's the wiring inside of us. But here we can tear drywall out and so forth, and we will. But we need to do that at a time when it will not hurt the building and our services. Anyway, I just decided tonight, keep it light. We're not going to do the serious topic. We'll do that next week. There's enough suffering in the world. There's enough hard times for Jews, and sometimes I'm a little bit salty that I had to be a rabbi at this time when this is happening. I would have preferred to have been the next generations earlier. Rabbi Wein and his generation, they convinced us, boy, not just Rabbi Wein, every rabbi I talked to, no more anti-Semitism in America. That's never going to happen again. As the rabbis once said, there is no prophecy anymore in Israel. So this holiday of Shavuot, that Miriam, I didn't know you loved it so much, but you were awfully happy to come tonight, so that's cool. It's so overlooked. We've got no villains. There's no Haman here. There's no Pharaoh here. There's no Seder. It's a couple of nights depending on what you're doing. It's no nights for most of us. One night in Israel and so forth. And I sort of feel that because humanistic Judaism loves to rediscover and reposition and reinterpret, that makes this actually the perfect holiday. But there is one feature about it that is a little problematic. It's the feature that took over. It didn't start that way. You heard in the service that it was the rabbis who decided this was the date of the giving of the Torah, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But that, I think, presents a special challenge to all modern Jews, and I would say even some traditional ones. No, but it didn't start that way. It actually started as an agricultural holiday, the way, as Ruth read, Sukkot did and Passover did. But by the time they got to giving this some kind of narrative, the reception of the Torah, the giving of the Torah was already done. This was the rabbis who did it some many hundreds of years later. But that doesn't erase the fact that it had a great ceremony. Now, the temple is gone in Jerusalem, and we don't want it back. I know some people think we do. As far as I'm concerned, the Muslims should have their Al-Aqsa, and we got a wall, and everybody's happy. Oh, they're not? Darn, I thought that was the perfect solution. When the temple was standing there, the first temple and the second temple, there was this amazing really ritual, the only one that's actually prescribed something that we, the average Jews, are supposed to say. Believe it or not, all the things in the Torah that we think we're supposed to say, this is the only time that the Torah says, say this, do this on that holiday. It says tell your children about the Passover, but it doesn't tell you exactly how to say it. We came up with that later and so forth. All it says is, you're going to have this Feast of Fruits, the second harvest festival. The wheat harvest was back at Pesach. So now this is I guess the other stuff that doesn't grow. I know very little about that. My week on a kibbutz taught me nothing, especially because I was down in the desert, which made it even less helpful. They do tell us in the Torah, however, that we are to bring a sheaf of that wheat. That's another reason I know that it's the wheat harvest. And that sheaf of wheat, we're supposed to wave it around and count it for 49 days from the holiday, meaning, I suppose, Passover, but some people thought it was Shabbat, because that's the holiday. And then on the 50th day, then we're supposed to go bring our first fruits, so I guess it was fruit, right, to the temple. That's why they put grapes up there. To the temple on that last day. And what are we supposed to do? Well, this is one of my favorite parts. You're supposed to go to the priest with your basket of fruits. And literally it says, when you enter the land that your God, Yahweh, is giving you as a heritage, and you possess it and settle it, so it's very big on the land part, take some of the very fruits of the soil which you harvest, put it in a basket. This is God talking to the Jews. Put it in a basket, like your dad or mom would say. Don't just walk around with the fruit like that. Put it in a basket. And you'll go to the temple, where he doesn't tell us yet where it is, but everybody reading this already knows. It's Jerusalem. And you go to the priest and you say, I acknowledge this day before your God Yahweh, meaning our God Yahweh, that I've entered the land that Yahweh swore to us. And this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years after that. So it's not about that person specifically. It's about a remembrance. The priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down in the front of the altar. I'm thinking this was maybe just a very small population of Jews who did this, because otherwise this would have taken way more than 24 hours to do. But we don't question the Torah that way. You recite as follows, and tell me if you remember this, because this you may know. My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there, but there he became a great and populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to Yahweh, the God of our ancestors, and Yahweh heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. He freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm and awesome power and signs and portents, bringing us to this place, giving us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore I now bring you the fruits of the soil that Yahweh you have given me. And then you leave before God, you bow low, you give the priest the fruits, and then there's a feast back wherever you're going. And this was a pilgrimage festival, so you were supposed to go to Jerusalem to do this. That's why it's a pilgrimage. Do you recognize it? Do you recognize the reading? We've all been in too many modern seders. We need to get back to the tradition of Maxwell House. The house of Maxwell, like the house of Akiva and the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, this was a very, very important place in Jewish history after coffee was invented. So this is actually one of the portions that is read in the Haggadah today. We don't say this anymore on Shavuot. This is a history, and it's more appropriate to Passover, because other than being about the land, which does speak about, agricultural gratitude, it's the story of the Exodus. So the rabbi said, well, we don't go to the temple anymore. We got to do something with this. Let's put it on Passover. They put it into the Haggadah, and it's very famous. Apparently, we have forgotten it because creative rabbis like me and Rabbi Jewish, we keep writing seders that don't have it. But many of them do. Now, I want you first just to notice one little thing. For a holiday that later became about the giving of the Torah, what's missing here? The giving of the Torah, right? We didn't just march out of Egypt and arrive in Israel with the milk and the honey and all that good stuff. No. It was, first of all, 40 years, but maybe they didn't want to remember that. I understand. A year and a half of COVID. I don't want to remember it either. But they did have a memorable stay there at Sinai. That wasn't something you forget. And yet it's not here. Whoever wrote this, that wasn't what was important to them here. I'm not saying they didn't know something about it. I'll talk more in a second. But this was not about that. This was about two things. We were homeless, and now we are in a place that is ours. This is our place. This is what we're grateful for. The first fruits are important, but it's the fact that this land that God gave us, this little tiny piece of land, is what helps define us. Now later we found other ways also, because the diaspora took place. Somebody said recently, I didn't want to get political, but I'll say it a little bit, you know, to remove Zionism, to remove the attachment to Israel from Judaism is to remove a lot of its content, frankly. It's a big, big part of the prayer book. I know we don't do the prayer book here, but it's a big, big part. But what this story does do is bind gratitude with collective memories of liberation and of now reclamation of this land. Now, of course, the temple goes away, and by goes away, I mean the Romans burned it up pretty good. And anybody ever been to Italy and seen the arch there? The Arch of Titus with the depiction? Yeah, so we know exactly what happened. It's not a myth. And it happened in the year 70 CE, on this side of the border of time that was established by the New Testament for whatever reason. And now we've got a holiday that barely had anything to do with anything anyway, and we don't have anything to do on the holiday. You know, that happened to Shmini Atzeret too. We turned it into Simchat Torah, so there was a lot to do. They turned this into a Torah thing too. And they said, this is going to be about receiving the Torah at Sinai. That's what it's all about. People are looking through the Torah. I don't see that anywhere in here, Rabbi. And so what did the rabbis do? They said, well, if you count it this way, and you look at it that way, and you think about it in the other way, and anyway, there's no real chronology in the Torah. Did you know that? The rabbi said there's no before or after in the Torah because it was so messed up they couldn't figure it out. It makes all perfect sense until the Exodus, and then it's just 4 books of where the hell are they? So they said, but we do know where they went first. 7 weeks later, they got there. They don't even have a date for this, but on the 50th day, so the first of now would be the 8th week, they received the Torah. And they put it all together, and then they said, well, how do we know we got the Torah there? Because it doesn't even say where we got the Torah in the place where you're saying we got the Torah. It says we got the 10 Commandments. It doesn't say the Torah. And then there's a million other places that says the Torah. And what is the Torah anyway? Because are they writing it as they go? You think I'm the first person to ask this? This is in the Talmud. They ask serious questions. Moses, he wrote down what God dictated. What about the last chapter when he dies? One rabbi said he was crying when he wrote it. He was also 120 years old, so maybe he was done. I don't know. I don't know anybody who lived that long. But the truth is that the Torah is not the Torah yet in any place in the narrative itself. Torah can just mean law. It can mean instruction. The Torah is the law, the instruction, but we know it's more than that too. There's a lot of humor around this. One of the questions I always had, for instance, was, all right, so we know they didn't have paper, they didn't have parchment, there was no papyrus, right? They knew that. The people writing this knew that for sure, because what did they write it on? Something else. What did they write it on? Clay tablets, right? They chiseled it into tablets. And how do you get that whole Torah in an ark, in that little ark? You know, the one from Indiana Jones and also from the Torah. The fact that that now has for 40 years been every rabbi's reference point shows that we do have some lacking in the good illustrations we're using in a religious school. And even when they got to the consensus that, okay, whatever happened at Sinai, it was the big intro to getting the Torah. And then they started telling stories, and I wanted to share these with you because I've never shared them in a humanistic setting before. And they're really interesting that the rabbis had their own confusions and their own emphases. So listen to this first story. This is from the Talmud. It's in other places too, but this is in the Talmud. The Torah says, it does say this, that the people stood at the foot of the mountain. That is there. It says they stood at the foot of the mountain about to hear the Torah, whatever, the word of God. But one rabbi said literally, and this works in Hebrew, doesn't work as well in English, that literally they stood under the mountain. Under the mountain. How so? Well, according to this rabbi's teaching, God held the mountain over their heads, hung it over their heads. And he said, if you accept the Torah, wonderful. If not, this will be your grave. This will be your grave. So the Israelites got a choice. Wasn't much of a choice. But this idea that we were coerced into it, not really, you know, was sort of, look, he did free us from Egypt, for goodness sake. First he brought us to land, then he brought us into slavery, but then he released us from slavery. So we have a good story, and it made great movies, and obviously a terrific religion came out of it. But in a sense, the idea that we were coerced, even though we should be grateful, was problematic. There's another voice, though, in the Talmud that responds with a little twist. He says that the people said, we'll give it some thought. Please put the mountain down. Thank you very much. And God sort of trusted them. And then way later they said, yeah, everything's working out. You got it. We'll make a covenant with you. So that was a way of easing this one. But my favorite story is exactly the opposite of this one. And it's not my favorite story because I love the lesson. I love that it's the opposite of this one. So the Torah, it's called the Torah's first offer. It comes from Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael, in case you're taking notes. I know some of you like to read that work. It's an ancient midrash is what it is, an ancient interpretation. It goes back probably around 1700 years old. It teaches that when it came time to give the Torah, God did not go to the Israelites first. God offered it to the entire world. Now they get this from a verse. And this one you might, maybe you heard these growing up. I did too. So God approaches the descendants of Esau, Jacob's evil brother. And they say, will you accept the Torah? And they said, so what's in this thing? It says, thou shalt not kill. They said, that's not for us. No, we're into killing. We live by the sword. We die by the sword. Violence is the big thing with us. Next, God goes to the Ammonites and the Moabites. And they said, so what does it say? It says, you shall not commit adultery. And they said, but our people began with Lot's daughters. You know the story of Lot's daughters, right? Because there are children here, and I don't know if I should say it. But let's just say the children and the father, that's enough. Usually they're not children, so I don't have to worry about it. But the adults understand. Anyway, they said, that's really our whole thing, and move on, please. So God then went to the descendants of Ishmael. I know Ishmael today is associated with being the father of the Arab nation. That was not true at this time. And they asked, what's in it? And God said, you shall not steal. And they said, our ancestor was a man who had his hand against everyone. It says that in the Torah. He had his hands against everyone. Your hand will be in everything, and everything will be in your hand. So that implies stealing. Taking what we need, they said, is in our nature. And so it went on and on. As the Psalm says, all the kings of the earth heard your words, O Lord, and they listened but did not accept. Only Israel said yes. So here we have a story of great coercion. Take it or leave it. I'm going to drop a mountain on you. And the other one, oh, aren't we great? We took this wonderful book. We're the best. It actually goes on to talk about the Noahides, which were like supposed to be all the people in the world who were pretty good, and even says they screwed up. So this is these two contrasting, this tension. This tension is, to me, is one of the reasons that I don't accept these stories as being true. And it's only one of thousands of reasons, but it's an important one. Maybe one of the foundational for me, and I think for lots of us who are thinking humanistic or modern Jews. But what I do like about it is that as traditional Jews, they remind us that discomfort with the idea of divine command, with the idea that God has a perfect plan for us as Jews and so forth, that Jews have always been uncomfortable with that, or they would not have told these conflicting stories. This is a foundational moment for us, and we can't even get our stories straight. And one of them is worse than the other, and the other is worse than the other one. But it does, I think, remind us that it's a product of their times and the things that they were dealing with. And I think that's great. Another wonderful tradition we heard really briefly is the Book of Ruth. The Book of Ruth is, I would say, one of my top 5-10 in the whole Bible. Not in the Torah, by the way. It's in the rest of the other parts of the Bible. It's a story of inclusion. It's a story of a Moabite woman. We just heard about the Moabites, right? No good, no good nicks. And here we have in the Torah a Moabite woman who now casts her lot with the people of Israel, who, when she has no reason to leave Moab, her mother-in-law is going back, her husband's dead, so there's no attachment by kin anymore. Her sisters-in-law, who also lost their husbands to the same mother-in-law, they're staying behind. They want to start over their lives, but in Moab, where they're from. But she says, no, I'm going with you. Your people shall be my people. Your God will be my God. It's set during the harvest, and that's probably why we read it. But it's also, I think, a great example of how we bring people into our world. You know, humanistic Jews are, in some ways, with our openness, not having these gates, not having these high walls to climb over to become Jewish, We are helping to replicate what the author of this book was doing. The author of this book, whose work was selected to be read on Shavuot, not every book gets selected for a major holiday. He was saying to other Jews, you're doing this wrong. You're making it too hard. You're making it too difficult to become Jews. You're making us too exclusive. We want new people. And that was a real debate that was happening. There's another book called Ezra, where we hear about the other side. I love that this is there. And I also feel connected in a certain way to the fact that the Ten Commandments are how people ritualize this. Yes, the cheesecake is very nice. And by the way, thank you, Carol, for putting together a beautiful dairy oneg for us tonight. But the idea that we would stand, we didn't tonight because that's not our custom, and we didn't do the Ten Commandments, but that we would reaffirm the things that are important to us. Now, the Ten Commandments, I've spoken about them a million times. They're really not that incredible. I know people want to, oh, they're the bestest laws ever, etc. Even the rabbis, many of them knew these were common sense laws. They said it. Now, other rabbis got mad at them, but that's what Jews do. We read tonight 10. Open your heart to all the possibilities of life, value people over possessions and meaning over materialism, speak the truth with honesty, respect, take time for joy and wonder, forgive yourself and where possible others, protect and nurture life, be faithful to those you love, be generous of spirit, walk in your neighbor's shoes, cultivate gratitude. And, when I read these the first time, I said, oh, those are nice. What humanistic book did that come out of? And I realized it was actually a rabbi, somebody I was familiar with, who had put this little list together. And then I began to think to myself, wait a minute, these are Jewish too. Of course they're Jewish. That's why we're reading them here. This isn't a humanist association meeting. Open your hearts to all the possibilities of life. Deuteronomy says, choose life. Choose life. It's a core biblical idea. It's a core Jewish idea that we engage with the world, that we take advantage of what we can, that we seek opportunity, value people over possessions, meaning over materialism. Pirkei Avot, the chapters of the Fathers, rabbinical work of ethics, says, who is rich? One who rejoices in what they have. A rejection of materialism, excess materialism. Jews believe goods are fine. I have stuff, you have stuff, we all have stuff. But we must reject over materialism in favor of meaningful connections. That is what really makes life worth living. Speak the truth with honesty and respect. In Exodus, it says, distance yourself from falsehood. And in many places, including the Ten Commandments, it says, do not bear false witness. The Torah command here that is emphasizing integrity in our speech and our action, how important is that to humanistic Jews? And how wonderful is it to see it there in the Torah? Take time for joy and wonder. Ecclesiastes, probably the most humanistic book. It was Rabbi Wein's favorite. It's also mine. There, Kohelet, the man who brings people together to hear his thoughts, says, there is nothing better than to rejoice and enjoy the good of one's labor. To embrace joy, he says, is sacred, a Jewish teaching in the Bible. Forgive yourself and where possible, forgive others. I put the where possible in because I have a friend who's not into the forgiveness thing, although I think I've convinced her that there are many, many places where if we think about it exactly the same way, then it's easy to understand that there's levels of forgiveness. The guy who did what he did last week is not getting my forgiveness, not ever. But we have in Judaism, we have Yom Kippur, right? Yom Kippur atones for our sins, but we also atone. We apologize. It's a day for seeking forgiveness. It's a day of self-reflection and changing your way. So forgiving ourselves and forgiving others are really two sides of the same coin. They're two kinds of practices, and they are so Jewish. Protect and nurture life. Well, this one, I think that if there are just a short list of Jewish values on a list, most Jews will identify this one. Pikuach nefesh. The putting of a life before virtually any commandment. There's almost no commandment that you can't break. The only ones really deal with violating this itself. Someone's sick, you take them to the hospital. You get in your car on Shabbat, you take them to the hospital. You violate anything you need to violate, short of killing or harming someone else, in order to protect and nurture that life, that human life. It's an ultimate value. Choose life, as we saw in the first one. Be faithful to who you love. Now, this one I think was supposed to be related somehow to adultery, but really it's about us being faithful to our families. You know, most of us believe in marriage. I certainly believed in it. Arthur and I fought hard enough for it. And most Jews get a ketubah, you know, the marriage document, but everybody gets modern ones these days. I even know people who get the Orthodox writing, but then they have their own in English because that's what they speak. And we frame them and we put them on our walls, but why? They're little reminders to us. Reminders to cherish the people, that we make promises. We make promises to children when we bring them into this world. We make promises to our spouses or our other loved ones, and people who are close to us and sacred really to us. And so to be faithful to them should not be a big ask. Be generous of spirit was number 8. Deuteronomy says, open your hand to the poor and the needy. Not just charity, but open your hand and your heart to be generous in kindness. Walk in your neighbor's shoes. Well, many cultures have that, but Leviticus also teaches one of the most famous of all, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. In the Hebrew, it really has the connotation of understanding at the deepest level of empathy what that person needs and who that person is, and then treat them in that way as if you were that person. Cultivate gratitude. You know, this is something, and I've spoken about it on the high holidays even. I think I even got an article in Humanistic Judaism magazine out of it about cultivating gratitude as humanists. It's kind of hard. As cultures, we've shaped all our gratitude as thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God. I mean, honestly, when something good happens, it doesn't have to be major. The 5th inning the other day, when I said thank God, because the Tigers took the lead. And I was pretty happy about that. But you know, that's really not our thing as humanistic Jews. And we can't really thank fate because we don't believe in fate. We can be grateful though. We can be grateful for the circumstances we have. Because being grateful also reminds us that when things go the other way, and they always do, because that's what human life is about, that gratitude can also give us comfort. I think about people I've lost, that the gratitude allows me to forget all the shvach, the stuff I don't want to remember, and to appreciate those good times, and they give me comfort. And then I look at my children, and I look at my grandchildren, and if you can't feel grateful to no one in particular, just this great experience of being alive. Richard Dawkins once pointed out, it's like winning the lottery of all lotteries, of all the spermatozoa and all the ova that would have come together. That little unique combination made you, and you came out and you got to do stuff and have some fun and smile if you're lucky. And so those of us who are, cultivating gratitude's not a bad thing. Torah, I think, for us as humanistic Jews, is something I believe that we should become more in love with and more interested in. I know it's hard because the main character is somebody we think is fictional, and we don't think, I believe it's pretty well established that God is fictional, but God is also, like all fictional characters, a projection of our hopes and our needs at a certain time. And the entire process of interpreting and reinterpreting it, while I do not advocate kosherizing the Torah, as Rabbi Wein also did not, that was his word he came up with, I do think, like he did, that going back and looking at it as a document that set off other documents, set in motion reflection on what life should be. So it's not the particulars of what the Torah says. It's that we Jews revered the word and created it and recreated it and recreated it, and we're recreating it at this moment. I just did it for you. That's Torah too. That's our Torah. That's humanistic Torah. Humanistic Torah is about celebrating this ancient tradition, this holiday that celebrates our texts, the fruits of our heritage, and for reinforcing our own vision of Sinai. No thunderous decrees, no mountains over our head, or wonderful feelings of being so pure that God chose us. None of that, but instead a choice to live thoughtfully, to find meaning in life, to study, to connect to our people, to all peoples. I think that's what this holiday can mean for us. So happy Shavuot. It actually is Sunday night, and Monday and Tuesday if you're more observant, like some of my family. But I think it's something to give thought to. So Chag Sameach, and what do we got back there waiting for us? Oh, Carol's back there now. I requested cheesecake, so there should be cheesecake. I'm not allowed to eat cheesecake. I'm not currently allowed. Huh? No, I can have a bite, but I have dinner. I eat dinner late on Friday night. What are we singing here? We're singing about peace, about love, about joy, all the things we just talked about. And we get a glissando. Did I use the word right? A big one, a big glissando.
This is a glissando.
All right, whatever.
That's a glissando. This is called arpeggio.
Hit it. Hit it, maestro.
May we know peace as we go on our way. May we be guided by love. May we be blessed with health and joy. May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. May we be sheltered by the wings of peace. May we abide in safety and in love. May grace and compassion find their way to everyone. May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom. 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 May this be our blessing. Shalom.
Before we leave, I failed to say something important, because it is a tradition to wish someone who has returned from the land of Israel in peace a warmest of welcomes. Rachel Himmelho is here tonight. She and her brother Wes just returned from Israel last week. Brucha haba'ah, and welcome back home. And thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Arthur, and thank you, David, for the streaming, and all of you. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.